All right, now we're going to go and talk about Eisenhower and foreign affairs and the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's what this one's about. Okay, so Eisenhower came out with his own doctrine, just like Truman had, just like a bunch of other presidents have. A doctrine, if you remember correctly, is a belief or a set of beliefs that you live by or go by. Okay, so the Eisenhower doctrine says this. Okay, we're going to keep the Truman doctrine, and we're going to add something to it. The U.S. pledges to use military force if necessary to protect its economic interests in the Middle East. Basically, Eisenhower is saying this: we will consider an economic attack as if it was a physical attack on the United States, and we will respond in force, not with money, but with bullets, okay, or bombs. So, around this time, Fidel Castro leads a rebellion in Cuba, okay, against corrupt dictator Francisco Batista, okay, and then he aligns himself with the Soviet Union and becomes a communist country. All right, let me explain all this stuff. This is a big story, okay, a long story. Cuba forever was like Las Vegas on steroids, okay? You could get anything you wanted in Cuba if you had enough money. The leader of Cuba is a man named Batista, okay? He's the king, basically. And Cuba is the playground for rich Americans. They fly in on the weekends, they gamble, they get hookers, they get drugs, they get whatever they want, they go back home with STDs and empty pockets, okay? So, that's what Cuba is. Now, a guy named Fidel Castro, this one right here, Fidel is a revolutionary, okay? He wants to take over Cuba. And he had actually tried a Cuban revolution before and failed. And then he escaped to Mexico. Well, Dwight Eisenhower wants to get rid of Batista because of the bad influence that he is to everybody in America. So it's causing America problems, so he wants to get rid of the dictator. What he does is Fidel Castro contacts Dwight Eisenhower after his failed revolution, and he says, would you fund a new revolution in Cuba? And so Eisenhower says yes, and he uses the CIA to train Fidel Castro and his revolutionary army to beat Batista. They give them guns, they give them ammo, they give them all the logistic support that they need. And then they invade, okay? Once they invade and the capital of Havana is captured from Batista, Batista flees and he goes to America, of all places, to seek asylum, along with 800 of his other men, okay? Now, Fidel Castro is the leader of Cuba. He is the dictator. And he has a surprise for everybody that he hasn't told anyone yet. He's a communist. Our main foreign policy was containment of communism. We literally just funded a communist revolution 90 miles away from our coast. Dwight Eisenhower was mad at this point. So what he does is remember those 800 Batista men that went and they live in Florida right now? Okay? He goes up to them and he says, how would you like to take Cuba back from Fidel? And they say, okay. So the CIA trains the Batista men to go and take over from Fidel Castro. Now, whenever they plan this out, oh, by the way, when Fidel announces that he's a communist, it's from Russia. He actually flew to Russia, and he is holding hands with the leader of the Soviet Union. He is really strongly in with the Soviets. He's basically one of the Warsaw Pact members. But getting back to this, the men that were going to invade and take over power from Fidel were going to go into the Bay of Pigs. That was the idea. Now, by the time that the men were all trained and the things were ready to go, John F. Kennedy had become president. And Kennedy is the one that gave the green light for the Bay of Pigs invasion. So at night, they sailed in here and they dropped the men off. Now, a lady that worked in the CIA was actually childhood friends with Fidel Castro. She told him everything that was going to occur. the whole invasion, the plans, when it's going to be, how many men, all that. So since Fidel already knows it's coming, when it's coming, and how bad it's going to be, he surrounded the Bay of Pigs with machine gun nests. And whenever these men were dropped off in the pitch black of night, as soon as the sun came out, they started moving towards Havana, and the machine guns opened up, and every single one of them got killed. It was an ambush, and the lady, basically, she's a treason. I mean, she was convicted of treason after that. We found out about her because of this and several other things. Now, we tried to kill Fidel for a long time. It never worked because the CIA was always in charge of it, and this lady would always tell Fidel what was going to happen. One time we got really close, and we almost killed him with an exploding cigar, actually. As cartoonish and stupid as that sounds, but it really happened. He lit it up, and it blew up in his face like in the cartoons. Okay? So all 800 Batista men were killed. They were radioing the United States for help, and we didn't help them. We did not go and pick them up. We let them all get slaughtered because our main foreign policy, again, is containment. It's not rollback. It's not the U.S.'s policy to invade Cuba. It's the U.S.'s policy to help Cuba fall and get back into democracy, but not with American soldiers. All right, so here we go. The Bay of Pigs involved a failed attempt to overthrow Castro by Cuban refugees from the United States. Kennedy refused to allow direct U.S. military help to overthrow the communists. The Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev, okay, that's the new guy, that's the guy after Stalin, then seeks to retake West Berlin. Kennedy responds with a threat to use nuclear weapons, and the Soviets back down but start building the Berlin Wall. Okay, so if you remember from the last set of videos, Berlin was split into 4 different pieces. The Allies owned 3 of them, the Soviets owned 1. And inside the Soviet sector, we also have the city of Berlin, not just Germany. I think I said Berlin, I'm sorry. Germany was split into 4 pieces. But Berlin was also split into 4 pieces inside the Soviet sector. So this time, instead of having a blockade and allowing America to just dump supplies in, like the Berlin airlift, Nikita Khrushchev, he didn't surround the city. He invaded the city, okay, with a bunch of tanks. We're talking about over 1,000 tanks invading West Berlin. Well, Kennedy used his practice of brinkmanship. He told Nikita Khrushchev, he said, you can either get those tanks out of West Berlin or there will be no West Berlin left to get them out of. I will nuke it. I'm going to flatten Berlin if you don't get out. Now, Khrushchev backed down. He did not want to lose that many Russian forces. He withdrew from West Berlin. The Allies took it back over, or I should say NATO took it back over. But to stop the, basically to save face, he built a wall. Because the problem was all the people in East Berlin, and remember, it's surrounded by communist Germany at this time, okay? Everybody was flooding in and sneaking in to West Berlin. And this was an embarrassing thing for the Soviets because why on earth would you want to leave the communist utopia, right? If everything's so great and if communism's the best form of government, why was everybody trying to get into the capitalist side of Berlin and nobody was trying to get out into communist Russia, okay, into the Soviet Union? So they had to build a wall to stop refugees from flooding the borders and flying out of West Berlin. The Berlin Wall is between 8 and 20 feet, depending on the location. And they had guard towers all around. And if you tried to get over the Berlin Wall, you got shot by machine gun fire. And this Berlin Wall stayed up from the 1960s all the way until about 1990. Okay? So, let's talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis a little bit. We got to get into it. Okay? So, we get reports, confirmed reports. We have hard evidence that nuclear missiles have been sent to Cuba. This communist little country 90 miles off of our coast. Now, the Cold War wasn't just about how many nukes you can get. It's about how close can you get your nukes to your opponent. Because if you get a bunch of nukes really close to your opponent and you can launch them fast enough, your opponent will not have time to respond. It's kind of like a sucker punch. Okay? So, we got a bunch of nukes on the island of Cuba during JFK's administration. We find out about it, and we have a blockade of the island of Cuba. And we issue a statement. We say that any Russian ship that approaches the blockade will be fired upon. It will be considered an act of war. Congress is begging John F. Kennedy to flatten the island of Cuba with nukes. Just blow it all up. And JFK's little brother, Bobby Kennedy, actually is the one that convinced him not to. He said, if you nuke Cuba, Russia nukes us, and this whole thing is over. For 13 days, we were literally on the edge of nuking the entire planet and destroying everything. So we've tried really hard to contact Nikita Khrushchev. And after several days, he finally called us back. And basically, he said, JFK said, you got to get those nukes out of Cuba. And he said, fine, then I want you to remove your nukes from Hungary. Uh-oh. See, we had nukes right next to their country, the Soviet Union, in Hungary, which used to be the Ottoman Empire. And JFK had no idea that Nikita Khrushchev knew that we had nukes that close to him. He said, you started this. You remove your nukes, I'll remove my nukes, and this is all over with. So JFK said, okay, fine, we'll remove ours, but everybody knows that you have yours there. Us putting him in Hungary is a secret, okay? It's a top secret program. I can't out the people that are doing that because some people in Hungary don't even know that the nukes are there. So we might upset our ally, Hungary, if we actually say this. So Nikita Khrushchev said, fine, just get the nukes out of Hungary and then I'll take my nukes out. JFK played him brilliantly. What did the newspapers report? Because he had to keep it a secret that our nukes were in Hungary, the newspaper only reported that Nikita Khrushchev removed his nukes from Cuba. And it makes JFK look really strong, like he had intimidated Nikita Khrushchev into taking the nukes out of Cuba while giving up absolutely nothing. After this, it goes pretty badly. This is the second time that JFK officially has made Nikita Khrushchev back down. And so the Russian high command basically told Nikita Khrushchev, you got two choices. You can retire or you can die. So Nikita Khrushchev takes a break. You know, he goes into retirement after the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we have a political cartoon. We got JFK, okay? He is sitting on an American bomb. And we have Nikita Khrushchev sitting on the Russian bomb. Both of them are arm wrestling, okay? This cartoon is about brinkmanship. They both have their finger on the button. They're both struggling. They're trying to bluff each other, and neither one of them can press the button. So that's the Cuban Missile Crisis. It is the closest we ever came to destroying the entire planet in one go. Here we go. Which event played the largest Which event played the largest role in bringing the United States to the verge of nuclear confrontation? And the answer is the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is a super question on the leak test. It will be on there, most likely. It will definitely be on my final. So I want you to underline it, circle it, highlight it, make sure that you study that question. You need to know that's the closest we ever came to destroying the entire planet. It's kind of important, okay?